how do we know that God really is interested in this world and in each one of us? How can we know what he's like? Well, the best answer is Jesus himself. The Bible tells us that Jesus was both fully God and fully human. He was both God the Son, part of the Trinity, the three-in-oneness of God, something we'll think about in another session, and also fully a person like us. Now that's something we can't really get our heads fully around, something which is in many ways a mystery. But what better way of communicating with us? What better way of developing a relationship with us than by becoming one of us? Jesus is given a number of names in the scriptures. One of them is Emmanuel. You may hear that quite a bit at Christmas. And it has a significant meaning because it means God with us, God himself, come to earth to be like us, to live among us, ultimately to die and rise again for us. That's how God shows he's interested in real things, in all the nitty-gritty of the world and in human beings like us. When you read about Jesus' life in the 4 books known as the Gospels, the beginning of the New Testament, you'll see to say he was both God and human is the only way to make sense of him. Now, he knew what it was like to go hungry, to thirst, to grieve when those close to him died, to work hard, to be homeless, to be tempted in every way, but he never gave in. He never acted in a selfish or evil way. He also knew what it was to suffer and to die. He gave himself totally for the good of other people. He healed the sick and he gave sight to the blind. He fed the hungry, loved the seemingly unlovable, eating and drinking with people who most of society steered well clear of. And he chose to go to his death, to take on all that is evil through his own self-sacrifice. And he rose again from the dead, the firstborn of the new world to come, the first of a new way of being human. If this world isn't important, if human life and human needs like pain, injustice and hunger weren't important, then God would never have come. But he has come. And he brought God's kingdom, God's rule, God's revolution with him. Jesus' healing, his acceptance of the socially outcast, his self-giving, among many other things, are signs of God's future world in the present. And he invites us to be part of that same work, that same story in our lives. Then, when we read the 4 Gospels, the 4 complementary biographies of Jesus, which we use throughout the very early church, we see they seem to spend so much time, in fact about 1/3 of their content, on the last week or so of Jesus' life, on the events leading up to and coming immediately after his death by crucifixion. Now, why is that? Surely the writers didn't get in all the good things he did while he went about Palestine. Surely there's so much more good news in all the things he'll have said and done. In fact, one of the gospel writers, John, tells us that not even the whole world would have enough room for all the books which could be written about Jesus' life on this earth. Maybe so. But the image of the cross looms tall over the whole New Testament. Something incredibly significant was going on when Jesus died on the cross. Incredibly significant. For 2,000 years, people have tried to tie down neatly that significance, to understand in a nice, easy, neat way why Jesus had to die. But the fact is, it's so huge, so wide-ranging and so important that we just cannot sum it up quickly or neatly. It deserves a lot more than that. We can't say in a short presentation what all the benefits of Jesus' death and resurrection really are. Sure, for the Jewish leaders of the day, for 3 days at least, it seemed they'd finally got rid of someone who challenged their power and their traditions. For the Romans who occupied the land, it may have seemed like they'd got rid of a potentially dangerous revolutionary. But for Jesus' disciples, for those first followers and friends, once they met him risen, and once he revealed to them his purposes for them and the world, his death and his resurrection took on enormous significance. So much significance that they were prepared to risk their lives to communicate that to others. Now, the New Testament scriptures give us various reasons about the importance of the cross, and his followers over the centuries have dug even deeper and wider into all this. But here we'll just look briefly at two metaphors or images which try to convey how incredibly significant the cross is. There's plenty of suggested further reading on the website if you want to explore any of this more. Let's begin with the idea that at the root of our problems, at the root of that feeling that something isn't quite right with us and with the world, that all that is rooted in our distance from God. Losing touch with the one behind the entire universe is the biggest contributor to the situation that we find ourselves in. Now, the New Testament, the newest part of the Christian scriptures, claims that the cross deals with this dis-ease and with its cause, our distance from God. All the reflections on Jesus' death are rooted in the idea that he died for us, that is, for all human beings, and in fact, for the whole world. The central Christian belief is that Christ's death has somehow put us right with God and given us a fresh start. Now, theories as to how this works are another matter. A good many different theories have been held throughout the ages. But what all Christians are agreed on is that it does work. Theories about Christ's death are not Christianity. They are explanations about how it works. The truth is, Christians would not all agree as to how important each one of these theories are. But I think they will all agree that the thing itself is infinitely more important than any one of the explanations that people have come up with. And I think most people would probably admit that no one explanation is never quite adequate. The theories then about what was going on the cross are not themselves the things that we are asked to accept. The Christian belief is that the death of Christ is the point in history at which something absolutely unimaginable from outside breaks through into our world. And if we can't picture even the atoms of which our own world is built, of course, we're not going to be able to picture this. In fact, if we found that we could fully understand it, it would show it was not what it professes to be. The inconceivable, the uncreated, the thing from beyond nature, striking down into nature like lightning. You may ask what good it will be to us if we don't fully understand it all. But as C.S. Lewis wrote in his book Mere Christianity, that is easily answered.
A man can eat his dinner without understanding exactly how food nourishes him. A man can accept what Christ has done without knowing how it works. Indeed, he certainly would not know how it works until he has accepted it. We are told that Christ was killed for us, that his death has washed out our sins, and that by dying He disabled death itself. That is the formula. That is Christianity.
With that in mind then, and remembering that something so big and so significant is beyond full human understanding, let me just share with you a couple of the most common theories, remembering that the metaphors used come from particular cultures and particular times. First, there's the idea of justification. This uses legal terminology to suggest that all human beings are guilty of going our own way, of ignoring God and his purposes for the world. That is the true meaning of the word sin. Sin is an attitude, it's a condition in which we choose to push God out of the way, to ignore him. And that in turn leads to behaviours and ideas and attitudes that are incredibly damaging to this world and to us as individuals. And so this theory goes, there's a price to pay, a natural consequence of those decisions that we make. We get what we deserve, a life without real meaning and purpose, and ultimately to live forever with what we've chosen, life without God. And God in Jesus takes the punishment on himself in our place. He's our substitute, and in legal terms, he justifies us. Legally, we're able to take our rightful place close to God again. The price has been paid. It's really important not to see this as God punishing his son. The heart of it is that God bears all that himself. God himself paid the price. Justice is done. We are reconciled with him, forgiven, given a clean slate and a fresh start. Secondly, there's an idea known as Christus Victor, which simply means Christ the victor. Essentially here, Jesus dies in order to defeat the powers of evil, such as sin, death, and the devil, in order to free humankind, us, from our bondage. Jesus took on everything that was evil on the cross and exhausted them, rising to new life 3 days later. So within this Christus Victor framework, the cross defeated evil, thereby setting the human race free. Here's what the biblical scholar and writer Tom Wright says in an interview, which is available on YouTube.
On the cross, dark powers were defeated, so the power of love could fill the world. We need a larger vision of the biblical narrative if we are to understand, preach, and live out the message and meaning of the cross. It sent shockwaves through the whole of creation. When Jesus is crucified, something happens, and the result is the powers that have locked up the world in corruption, decay, and death are overthrown. And Jesus is, from now on, running the show, even though it doesn't look like it, because we have the wrong idea of what power is and how it works. If we take the New Testament seriously, we ought to see that the crucifixion of Jesus is the means by which God's kingdom is actually launched on earth as in heaven, because the powers are defeated and this new world comes to birth.
So, this metaphor makes complete sense within the big story that we looked at in session 2. The cross, the resurrection, saw the beginning of a new world, a new creation in which we are to work with God to create it in part in the here and now. A new creation which will one day be fully realized. So finally, let's look at one overarching idea that some people find helpful and which summarizes elements of a whole number of theories. And that is reconciliation. Now, the word reconciliation makes us think of the putting right of relationships which have gone wrong. We hear of family members being reconciled, of nations at war being reconciled, and so on. The New Testament speaks of Jesus' death enabling reconciliation in a number of relationships between God and humanity. between human being and another human being, between humanity and the whole planet. The work of Jesus brings peace in all these areas and in more. Once and for all, the cross of Jesus enables reconciliation to happen, and his resurrection signals the start of our involvement in God's ongoing purposes of reconciliation and new creation. So a fresh start, the past forgotten, a new world ahead. Jesus' death on the cross then is like a call home to us. There are many ways of understanding its significance, but fundamentally, it enables us to be brought back to God, to be in close relationship with him, to enjoy and flourish in that relationship, and so to come to know who we really are, alive forever, more alive than ever, because we are close to God. It enables us to take our place in God's big story as our true selves and to live for the good of the whole world.